Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Cause Leadership Podcast. I'm Dave Hutchinson, and I'm pleased to have as my guest today Aki Temiseva, who is the current president and CEO of the United Nations Associations in Canada. Aki, welcome. Great to have you here today.
Thank you, David. My pleasure.
Uh, we've had some discussions over the course of time, and leadership is always an important piece of that. And you've been a leader in the international context, or certainly in the Canadian context now, but you've lived all around the world and experienced many different opportunities and organizations as far as leadership is concerned. So we're looking forward to tapping into some of your experience and expertise, and just glad that you're here today. So why don't we jump into that? Just give us a little bit of background. Who are you? Where did you start all of this, and how did life kind of get you into the charitable space? Those would be the kickoff questions.
Sure. No, happy to. Yeah. So I always start from afar, but don't worry. I won't spend too much time there. But when I was 10, we moved to Zambia with our family, and that I think has given the background to kind of a lot to who I am and how I see the world. Because I thoroughly enjoyed, still one of the best experiences, going to an international school with students from 50 different nations and really leaving the diversity in those formative years. And loved Africa too. So then my parents' career took me in different places, lived in Iraq, Baghdad. Then 3 times I've lived in the US, first an exchange student in high school, then later for work. And then being kind of in and out of Finland. So originally was born in Finland, probably half of my life or more than half of my life now outside of Finland, but always feel very much at home where busy cultures, multi-faith, multi-ethnicity, and I don't know if that would have turned out that way if I hadn't gone to Zambia, but I kind of say probably had something to do with that. From a career perspective, I've always enjoyed working with people and making the world kind of a better place. Loved functioning marketing and things around branding. So early on, so I did my master's in Finland in international business and marketing, and that took me into a career with Procter and Gamble, where of course it's one of the best marketing houses and great value. Still have lots of friends in that house from that time. Was there almost 10 years, but then after a couple of years of doing advertising and some other stuff, is what I called, I had an early midlife crisis, and said there has to be a bigger purpose, because I know there is a bigger purpose in the world, but I want to be part of that every day, not just for the voluntary work I was doing with lots of youth, for example. And that kind of never looked back. That's over 20 years ago. I then jumped into the not-for-profit, and funny enough, was my first not-for-profit job. I was was asked to be the CEO of World Vision Finland, which was a very small organization, a small unit of the global giant. And even I hadn't heard of it. And so I love those kind of challenges. I love to build things. I love to get people excited about, grand visions of and in this case of impact that impacts and help children. So that took me on that international development kind of path. So after 6 years in Finland, I was invited to lead the global marketing for all of World Vision out of London, UK. So took my family and moved to London, UK. But I think after about 12 years with World Vision, in total, I thought, again, I do want to experience other types of purpose, other types of organizations. So I had my own consultancy for a bit in London, which also taught me, again, something new. I hadn't done, being an entrepreneur myself, what it is to lead yourself, a team of one.
Yeah.
But I really learned a lot. But then I had an offer from another child-focused NGO based out of Richmond, Virginia.
Okay.
And so we packed out furniture in a container and moved across the Atlantic. Stayed there for about a year. When I got an offer, I kind of couldn't refuse from Toronto to work for Right to Play as their global VP, heading their 7 offices. There are 5 in Europe and 2 in North America. We've really felt that Toronto was kind of our home. So this life of we called nomad with furniture kind of ended. We said, let's make Toronto home,
Hmm.
and that's about soon 10 years ago. And then
Wow.
worked here in a few different organizations. After Right to Play, worked with an organization was originally called Christian Children's Fund of Canada, CCFC, that I helped lead rebrand into Children Believe, and then did a little bit of ocean conservation with Oceanwise before landing this. So
Yeah.
mostly international development, but always kind of the thing that been the guiding light for me is making the world a better place, right?
Mm.
Making the world a better place for not just globally, but in the communities where I live.
Great. Thank you, Aki, for that overview. I want to step back just a little bit. Well, maybe more than a little bit. Back to you said growing up in Zambia. So growing up in an international, very international context like that, was there some early leadership experiences that you gleaned during that time? Have you obviously born in Finland, growing up in Zambia? Your parents sounds like their careers carried them into other different countries as well. Just curious what your experience was there.
Yeah, no, I think I've always been kind of drawn into speaking up my mind. So, if you have a group setting, I'm the one who will, say what they think in a nice way, hopefully.
Yeah.
And then when you do that, especially in voluntary circumstances, or whether it's in a school life, like in Zambia, you'd be asked often to lead without even the intention. It's like, oh, well, you have an opinion and that sounds great. So why don't you take
Right.
charge?
Yeah.
So ever since from Zambia, and even before, probably, I've been very active in creating things, whether they're clubs, whether it's a sports club or whether it's a youth activity. There's an organization that I joined later, not in Zambia, called Children's International Summer Villages, which is all about cultural exchanges. Again, all of a sudden, I'm leading a whole, Helsinki branch, and then the national branch, just because I'm interested and passionate about something. And so I find myself in these leadership positions, which I don't shy away, but it's not that I want necessarily to lead, but I'm so passionate about those things.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. And if I could jump off that a little bit, I mean, there's other parents listening to this podcast. There's younger people that might be listening to the podcast as well. Kind of sounds like at an early age you knew that you wanted to be doing meaningful things and as you say, sort of contributing to the better good. From your perspective, as we look at the charitable sector in Canada today, what can we do to attract a younger talent pool that maybe didn't have your experience, but certainly are growing up in a time when the needs are significant and the world is changing, and yet we need people to be interested in working in charity. Any thoughts of that from a younger person's perspective?
Yeah, no, I think, and especially with the current job now with United Nations Association in Canada, I've been very fortunate in my first 10 to 11 months here to be seeing youth in action, and it's been extremely encouraging, and so in all, I think we as leaders are in positions of power to kind of do this, is to empower and give them the opportunity. I've sometimes tried to give some good advice here and there, but mostly the youth need a platform. They need a platform to work on. They need to be trusted to lead, maybe to make their own mistakes. And then, so thinking of the charity sector at large, volunteer positions are really important, right? And again, sometimes I think we overcomplicate things with our processes. There's, of course, laws to be followed and CRA regulations to be followed, but beyond that, sometimes it is our own internal process. Like, oh, it's too much work, and what work am I going to give to them? And so, and this is where I think probably goes wrong when often you think like, if they're young, so they can help with the mailing, they can, no, I'm telling you, 16-year-olds, they know much more about many things than we do with all our leadership experiences. Give them a chance to really do something meaningful. Give them, projects with a start date and an end date. Give them a project and go for it. It's not going to cost a lot of time, and it's not going to cost you giving their hand. If there's so many young people just looking for those opportunities to take into practice their thoughts. So And if you do that, the reward is, at the minimum, they will speak very highly of your organization.
Mhm.
But at best, it's actually, they would lead to new career opportunities, even maybe with your organization.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you. Um, you made the transition from the corporate sector into the charitable sector. You mentioned having worked with Procter and Gamble, obviously a huge global organization, and you went to a global organization, but you went to a tiny experience of it with World Vision. Just curious, when you made that transition from a large organization to what was a smaller version of World Vision where you were, what was that like, and how did that affect how you led as well? Because I think the organization when you started was, or when you went over, was under 10 people, if I recall correctly.
Yeah. No, it's a great question. And I have to try to remember back to all the different feelings and learnings I had, but it
Mm,
was a steep learning curve, So
mm,
functionally, I think I was able to bring in a lot of the same things. So it was, I guess the comment is twofold. From a functional perspective, you could actually transform a lot of those learnings and those skills and experience you have to another sector. And that often is overlooked, I think. And you could do it both ways, from corporate to for profit, or the other ways, because our world is so siloed, which is a big passion of mine, talking about silos. But so that is not a problem from that perspective. But there are cultural shifts, right? And then
yeah.
some cultural shifts you're maybe called to change, to bring those cultures closer, and some you just have to respect and learn, and kind of, and be also respectful that I didn't know everything, right? So I think, starting from the last point, so coming from a corporate world of, from something like Procter and Gamble, I think I came with massive confidence on lots of things, and some of them were right, and some some of them I had learned, like, okay, maybe I didn't have the full story, but I came with that still
Yeah.
young man's energy of, like, this is how we're going to do it, and I know the things, which of course, when things get tough, you need that kind of grit to kind of believe in that that's how it's going to be. But at the same time, as I said, like, I came to a setting where that specific unit of World Vision was really kind of celebrating smallness, right?
Mm,
And so, to the point of, like, cost consciousness is the golden standard,
mm,
versus, for example, growing the impact or growing the organization to have more impact. And so that was thing where I had to kind of tread carefully, so I'm not going to discredit the good saving of money perspective, but knowing that that actually limits us. For example, just before I came, they had hired a marketing manager, and then he's the first one who had come with the audacity of saying, like, we could actually do color prints because we had done in black and white.
okay.
And then myself, I remember I was saying, okay, could I have actually a laptop, right, versus a kind of a desk computer? And they're like, oh, you
Right.
need a laptop? I said, well, I kind of travel. And you're going to travel? I said, oh my God. Yes, I was also going to travel. And so the idea of, like, I think what I was able to bring also was kind of the importance of networking, the importance of being connected, which goes back to kind of my opening about the community, how that is important. And in that case, really connecting, World Vision Finland with the rest of the Finnish community, which became like the base for the growth of the organization. We're very much Finnish. We're part of our community, and what we do, yes, we help communities like that abroad, but really kind of coming closer to the people who wanted to help and donate. And I think that strategy really worked. You became more Finnish to become international, which
Mm,
is kind of
interesting.
which is very interesting.
Yeah. Okay. So for business professionals who I'm sure you do too, come in touch with, and they're some of them are partway through their career, others are maybe closer to the end of their career, 5 or 10 years of traction left. But I'll say this nicely: it made me tired of the corporate world and or the private sector, and they want to find a way to exercise their skill sets in a way that allows them to give back. Just briefly, any advice for folks like that who are making a potential transition like you did into the charitable space?
Yeah, and I've met, so along the journey, then other folks who have been able to sometimes guide into their new journey, and sometimes advise them not to.
Right, exactly.
And the reason is, like, it depends really, like, why you're wanting to make a change. Is it because you're tired of your boss, or you're tired of something? and you just want to break. And sometimes there's a misconception that somehow the not-for-profit life or charity life is easier, and that's the first misconception. Like, if you're coming for a break,
This
don't
is
make the
not it.
change. You're like, you will have half the resources and you have to do double as good. And
Yeah,
so break is off the record. There might be a different culture that might be more understanding if you're lucky, but
yeah.
even that's not guaranteed depending where
No,
you end up
exactly.
working.
Yeah,
So, but if you're truly like wanting to dedicate and you have the financial ability to take, probably a pay cut, a cut in your benefits, and you have truly a passion to making the world a better place, then really go for it. Yes. And then you should then be very specific maybe, and go into your heart. What do you want? Is it like you want to work in health? Do you want to work in local community food banks? Do you want to do international development? Or do you want to be building peace? Like, try to find within yourself, and maybe you don't know exactly, but if you don't quite know what's your game, volunteer.
yeah,
So if you really are after something, keep sending in messages, and then say like, I'm really interested in your organization. I really want to talk to you.
sure.
And then you might find a way to volunteer. So I just recently had with us someone who was in a bit of a sabbatical. They were going to go back into the corporate world, but they had time to spare, and they become just an amazing super volunteer, helping us with our team build and all kinds of things. And just because they reached out to me, and we had a great chat,
Yeah,
so that's kind of the advice I would look into. But as I said, be prepared to kind of say in your heart that you're doing this for the right reasons, because it's not going to be easier, and it's most certainly not going to pay you better.
yeah, yeah. No, exactly. Affirmative on both of those points. Yeah, for sure. So you then launched to a fairly, well, not fairly, quite senior role in World Vision, going right up to the international office, head of marketing for them. So you kind of left, you helped grow the World Vision in Finland, and then went into the broader international context with them. What was that like? Because that you're going from, maybe, I don't know that the culture was different, maybe it was, but certainly you're going into a much broader perspective on what they were doing globally.
Yeah, no, I mean it's really another very interesting transition, because you worked for the same global organization which had shared values and shared vision and mission of what the organization globally wants to achieve. But in one way, it couldn't be more different. You were in a country context, leading a team who were reporting to you. And you were able, with your board, your local board, to set the vision and the direction, right?
Mm,
Then you went into, so World Vision is organizationally federated model,
yes.
and
Yeah.
so they love to use a word which is very descriptive called interdependency.
Mm,
So there's not independency, or there's not like independence either. So it's interdependency.
sure.
And within that context, it means that you have to create a different kind of leadership by your even more of your persona and the thoughts you want to make happen. But you really don't have. So I was overseeing 22 what in World Vision called this is support offices, which are
Okay.
fundraising offices, from the largest one like US, Canada, and Australia, and to the very smallest ones like Finland and Malaysia and others
Hmm.
around the world. And then we had even 10 emerging nations, which were like on the brink of being able to actually do some proper fundraising, and they had different investment budgets. And so you really then had to kind of like, your team was everywhere, but it was not your team. I did have a small global team also just directly under me that was obviously needed for all the different things we were asked to do. But the other thing which I think I learned a lot, and maybe something post post my experience there, it is again the importance of relationships, to even in that large global network,
Mm,
to the different players, right? So you have a job description and you have a positioning of what you're supposed to do. That's only half of it, right? So
mm,
don't
sure.
trust that whatever empowerment or duties are, that they understood, especially if you're more in a federated network, by everyone. So you have to get that validation from each and every one, rather than kind of saying, well, we are the global center, so we have, this is our task because it says in our
Yeah,
job description.
sure.
If the others in that job description don't realize that this is your task, it's, you're actually, incapacitated to do your job.
Right.
And
Right.
that I kind of understood, like, so there was a little bit like, well, surely everybody knows this is how it works. Yeah, I guess in theory, but if in practice they don't, act in accordingly, and that of course is a lot of energy consuming work that you have to do continuously.
Yeah, for sure. So a lot of your experience was in the international context, and you were living in Europe, and then you came to North America. You were supporting international work that way as well, and then Toronto with Right to Play, again another international focused organization. What was it like? And I don't mean organizational culture, but European culture, US culture, now Canadian culture. How did you manage those transitions as a leader as well? Because those are, I mean, it affects obviously the organizations that you're working at
Mhm.
as well, but you've lived in global settings, and you're bringing a fairly broad swath of experience from what it means to move from culture to culture. So just curious what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So having kind of brought up, going back to the Zambian experience, into a variety of the influence from different cultures and the values of different cultures. For some part, also the personality you just grow up with. I adapt really well.
Mm,
Sometimes to my own detriment, maybe.
mm,
It's just like, oh, I'm just going to have to adapt, and that's it. A bit of a chameleon kind of thing, which we're so. But being a total chameleon is not good for you. So it's
mm,
good to have what your values are. So I think the first time I had to kind of really realize and again recognize them, which was a very positive experience, was when when we moved to Richmond, Virginia, where at the time, which was before Trump won administration, there was a lot of discussion in the politics about what the values in the U.S. are, and what
mm.
is transposed into the values in Virginia and Richmond, where I was, and there it was kind of. I started to draw some lines and really understand that there are some core values that you might not realize are part of you, and that you feel very comfortable in, and in the absence of those you don't.
Yeah.
And I think many of those core values that still growing up as a Nordic upbringing, where everybody's equal, and if they aren't, we should do something about it.
Mm,
We should at least call it, where everybody's welcome, where the very notion of human rights existence is that everybody can be who they are. Um, those you don't kind of wake up in the morning and think about those, but they're
yeah.
ingrained in you.
Yeah.
And those were kind of under attack while living in that context, in
Okay.
that era, when I was in Virginia. So that was one of the reasons when then there came an opportunity to move to Canada, where again I saw that those values that are very dear to me
Yeah.
are actually much more present, to say the least, in Canada. This was in 2016, which was really hard from a career perspective, because I can't praise enough their organization called Child Fund that I was working with. They're just a wonderful organization. My CEO that I report to was an amazing woman, and the board was great, and loved my job. And yet you were in this culture that you didn't
Mm,
feel that was you, and so
yeah.
that there was a huge discrepancy. Where your point of organization culture can be really great, but it
Yeah.
is within a context, right?
Yes, that's right. Yeah. So you came to Canada, and you worked with two or three organizations, and now you're with United Nations as the head of the Canadian Association, at least. Again, that's a global context for the organization to operate within, and you're representing it from a Canadian perspective. So some cultural elements there, I'm sure, that continue to be relevant to the work that you do. But tell us a bit about um, the United Nations associations in Canada, because it's obviously it has a lot of the same values that you've just sort of alluded to, but maybe if you want to kind of expand on what those are, and some of the work that they're doing and the context in which Canada contributes to the overall global effort from a United Nations perspective too. Be curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I love what we stand for, and the opportunities that have are in front of us. And again, I love, as I said, building things.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's another challenge where our awareness and our work is quite low, and but it's very interesting because there's very few people who don't know when you say United Nations who or what that is, right?
Yeah,
At least here
right.
in Canada. And so you have that, but then you go like, well, United Nations Association in Canada. So then comes the question mark. It's like, okay, so what do you do? So, and I love challenges like that. I was like, okay, let's make
Yeah.
this clear. So first, of course, we had to clarify it for ourselves as an organization. And I know 11 months in, we're still on that path, but I think we've got pretty good clarity. So the way I best explain it, we are the geographical arm of United Nations. So like UNICEF is all focused on children, UNHCR is all focused on refugees, etc. So they have a functional focus of
Yeah.
certain stakeholders and they're global organizations. So we're very much a Canadian organization focused on bringing UN alive in Canada. So what does it mean bringing UN alive in Canada? It's bringing its values, it's bringing its mandate alive in here in Canada. So, and again, not only, this is probably often the surprise, not only in terms of communicating what UN does somewhere else, but we have our own grassroots programs here in
Okay.
Canada.
Yeah.
We've been in existence for 80 years, as long as the UN, and we're celebrating our 80th this year, so it's a good year. So we've been in existence, but I think we've just done quietly our work as maybe as fitting to the Canadian culture, not making a
Okay.
big fuss about the achievements, but we've done this, and so we've got a huge alumni. If you look at often LinkedIn, there's like the logo. Our logo is in lots of places, so we've got
Mm.
alumni all from all those years, and obviously more maybe because of the social media from the last 10 years, you can
Sure.
see that there that we've been doing. But what we work at is of course, UN has three different mandates about peacekeeping and the sustainable planet and human rights, and then you can add more other things like international development, humanitarian aid, kind of. But the three core things remain the same as they did in 1945, and the best way that they've been brought alive now are they were first the Millennium Development Goals that have now been become SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals.
Yeah.
But that's one of the things I'm also trying to change is like, let's not talk with acronyms that are not clear to all the people. So
Sure.
even the SDGs, people in the sector would know, oh, of course, SDGs. But for the majority of the Canadians, I don't know what the percentage is, but there are a lot of people who would know if I say SDGs. So let's talk about what are the SDGs about. So I've decided that our organization at this time, we want to focus on 5 areas. So SDG 5 is about gender equity. So really kind of making sure, which is, I always say, ridiculous that even at this time in 2025 in Canada, we have to be talking about gender equity. And we're much better than some other country if you put all the countries in line all around the world. But there's still a lot of things, starting from equal pay and equality all the way to gender-based violence right here in Canada. And then SDG 10 is all about equity and inclusion, which I talked about. And that is linked, of course, to issues like around the indigenous peoples and how we are guests at their country and we remain guests. And then that in mind and being aware of that, how can we partner best with the indigenous communities to build a better, stronger, united Canada? SDG 13 is about climate change. And again, that term itself can be a divisive term.
Sure.
So it's more about, I talk about sustainable solutions. SDG 16 is the fourth focus area, which is about systematic change. So peaceful, systematic systems and processes that support all of this, which then talks to our role as an organization, being from grassroots all the way to kind of New York and beyond. So we really are working at the very kind of lowest level, community level. So we have projects in Toronto and Vancouver and all over the country. We have 13 branches spread across Canada that are volunteer based.
Okay.
So we have both national and voluntary-based projects, at the grassroots. But then we got to have some provincial support in transforming the situation we're working in, which is, for example, equal opportunity for youth. And then there's the federal, which is in Ottawa, and so the SDG 16 is all about kind of making sure that we can have systems in Canada we can be proud of that support everybody's efforts. And lastly, SDG 17, which is more of the how-to, which is innovative partnerships. And that's another one that I'm really kind of passionate about, which is going back to the silos thought that, it shouldn't be just not-for-profits by themselves or corporates by themselves trying to create change or government doing grants, but it's actually a combination of all of that. And so those 5 things are things we push. And we have, as I said, in addition to the branches, we have small staff here again that then links all of our work to the global context, but the work itself happens here in Canada.
That's great. And you mentioned significant volunteer involvement here in Canada. Can you give us a sense of scale of that?
Yeah, it's in thousands.
Yeah.
So I said 13 branches who are formally volunteering, and the biggest ones have hundreds of members, and but then there are, like, I would say, without any exaggeration, I get 10 emails, personal emails in my emails, people offering to become volunteers and this and that. So the good news is, going back to your first question on youth, and then they're not only youth who are reaching out, although many of them are. They're really wanting to engage, and I always try to be as creative as possible, as bring them on, either directing to the branches they're nearest of, or sometimes giving them opportunities at national.
So when you consider your leadership responsibilities today, and I know you've talked about always being happy to sort of take on a challenge, what would you identify as a couple of the key challenges that that either you're facing as a leader, or that your peers who are leaders in the charitable sector are facing these days? I'm sure there's a common theme in many of them, but are there particular ones that stand out to you, certainly as we look at the next 2, 3, 5 years?
Yeah, no, well, I think the one, just in general, that is for all of us to try to predict the future.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So, and that leads into, and is a close cousin to managing risk, right?
Yeah.
And we all come from different backgrounds, and we all have different boards, which then, of course, are depending on how you're registered. But for most of us, the people who have been tasked to kind of oversee both that risk and then give at least some guidance to the strategy, as well as designing your faith. So in that context, we all react differently. I've kind of stayed true to my approach in leadership, which is, trusting the experience. And I read a really good book about it, about how gut feeling is more than just the hunch, which way the wind is blowing. It's much more a collection of all your experience and skills that tell you that that's something you should go for, and this is definitely you should not go for, right?
Yeah, sure.
So, I try to lead with that, very well informed gut feeling.
Yeah, right.
With leaning towards risk taking. So I would say, as leaders, those leaders are going to be better equipped for the future, who can perhaps are more apt to risk taking, and that which also requires then agility, adapt and change.
Yeah.
And therefore, for example, as a leader, I'm not a big fan of 20, 30-page strategy papers that, use 6 months of writing, and they might be obsolete by the time you get there.
Yeah.
So I'm more of a one-page strategy person. But that's what you really need for, is like, it's as a leader, you need to have a vision where you need to go, what you want to do, despite the external environment, right? Or because of the external environment. But it's going to change. And of course, as I said, we all know how so challenging that now is, with the government change in Canada, with the, the many mini crisis UN has itself, plus everything that's happening south of the border, and in other countries where the nationalist kind of approach versus multilateralism is winning, and so that's some of the fights I have. Like my biggest challenge is to kind of keep saying that. I see one of my roles is to kind of be building an ecosystem of hope.
Yeah, I like
And
that.
that's that's something that I'm very passionate about, and it comes naturally. And because there really is kind of only two choices, when it comes to either kind of give up
Yeah,
and be depressed by everything that's going and say, well, this I have no say, I cannot change things, or you keep going. And that's something I also try to preach to my colleagues, saying like, look, we've got to be, standing our ground. There's some practicality, I know, for some colleagues in terms of their funding, of the pressures of what you can say or what not, but especially in terms of this sell your core values of who you are.
yeah,
And I think if you lead with that authenticity, then things like staffing and things people want to follow you.
yeah.
And so I think that's where we are in the world.
The ecosystem of hope. I like that. Yeah, I hope you're going to unpack that publicly for some folks.
Yeah. I think we're working on a bit of that.
Good, good. With regard to just a final couple of comments, as a leader today, and so you're going to appreciate this because it's coming from somebody in the talent pool, but from the perspective of the leadership transitions that we're seeing today, and the readiness of leadership for the charitable sector. We're certainly looking to a younger cohort, emerging leaders and potential leaders, even behind them. What would you like to see from a talent perspective in the Canadian charitable context be done in order to help attract and retain that younger talent that we need for the future of the sector?
Going back to the values, I think we have to be able to offer as a sector a meaningful role where we're seen as leaders of change
Yeah,
as a sector, where you have a unique chance not to tackle with your specific organization's challenges, which are now very much the same,
yeah,
whether it's fundraising or human human talent issues.
yeah,
Is that we have an opportunity right now in this time to actually be the leaders of change.
yeah,
And I think that will draw upon on people that it really is there is a sector there where things are not just about surviving but are more about thriving and creating a change. And that requires a lot of kind of strong voices from this sector to kind of speak on that.
yeah,
And that will inspire others to come. And then if it's just, very practical matters, what we offer has to be as competitive as possible to what the less appealing, less purposeful work has. Because
yes,
frankly, I mean, you want to no blame game, but I mean, that's what you get yourself is if you work in both sectors as I have. The other one is going to be meaningful and the other one is going to be less meaningful. I mean, and they're all great, important parts of our economy that we need. But we already have that. And then so it would be a shame if we just lose because people can make the transition because, life is expensive, life is that. And so it's never easy. So I guess I would say from a leadership perspective, sometimes that requires a total rethink of your organizational structure, culture, expenses. So I think trying to hold on to what we were even 5 years ago is not working because talent is at the core of everything.
yeah,
So even if you don't have a house, but you have 5 people, without a house, you're going to make more progress than you have 10 people in a house.
yeah,
And so very mundane example, but I think I truly believe that sometimes, those bold moves of restructure, rethinking, even the purpose or, doing half the things you're trying to do, because sometimes organizations just try to accomplish too much, but doing them really well will allow you to then have packages that will be not if one-to-one, but close to the other package they're being
Yeah.
offered. And that I felt many times that we've fallen short, that there are some great people there that would love to make the change, but they just can't. Not because they're greedy, but they just can't.
Yeah.
They've got mortgages and etc.
Sure. Yeah. No, totally. Aki, thanks so much for this today. I appreciate you being part of the podcast. Thank you for sharing your insights and experiences with us. And we'll have information about you and your organization in the show notes so that people can follow up that way. But grateful for you, and thank you for your leadership in the sector today. And we wish you every success in your current role. So thanks
Well,
again.
thank you, David. And likewise, thank you for your leadership. I really appreciate it.